Back. I hope you're feeling nourished and fed in more ways than one. I definitely enjoyed the makeup counter. I don't know if y'all noticed I came back with lashes. So shout out to Taj, the makeup artist. So we're at the halfway point of the day. And as a reminder, if you have any pictures, photos, videos, or quotes that you hear that really just again hit your soul, please share them with the hashtag Chroma22 and tag us at BB Founders. And shout out to everyone on live stream. Thank you for rocking with us virtually. So before we begin this portion, let's get ourselves centered. We just had lunch. Let's get ourselves centered and present and here. So if I can invite everyone, I invite you to close your eyes and take one deep breath in. And now let it out. All the stress, all the noise. Let's do it again. Take one deep breath in and let it out. Release all the anxiety, all the stress. All right, now open your eyes. Y'all feel present? Y'all feel here? All right. So at this portion, we will be having lightning talks with entrepreneurs and founders discussing the great work that they're doing. And first up, we have Miss Ramona Ortega, founder of wealthbuild.ai, sharing on intergenerational wealth. Thank you, Ramona.
All right. Hopefully I can sit. I know I'm supposed to be doing this with the camera, but I also have people here with me. So this is a lightning talk specifically around the 5 steps to building intergenerational wealth. I don't need to tell you why to build intergenerational wealth. Hopefully you all heard an amazing keynote this morning. So you have plenty of reasons. This is going to be quickly around how do we do it? Because oftentimes we're inspired to do something. It's like, yes, I want to invest. Yes, I want to learn about managing my money. It's like, well, okay, what are the actionable steps? I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm all about actually getting you very concrete information. So we've kind of broke it down to 5 things, and we have these amazing booklets as part of our Thrive campaign that are going to be available digitally to everyone. So for those of you on the live stream, you'll be able to get access. If you've registered, we'll be sending that out. And these aren't complete. I mean, this is, again, this is just sort of a starting point of the 5 pillars that we think are actually quite important, though, if you're thinking about building out a plan. And I have a lot of little sayings that you'll hear today. I think it's just ways to remember the tips. So the first one we're going to start on is you can't spend more than you make. And this is about cash flow and budgeting. So, if you're someone in the finance realm, you understand how important managing your cash flow is and projections. Same thing with your budget. You can't make more than you spend. You can't spend more than you make. And oftentimes that's where we get into a lot of trouble in terms of budgeting. I don't like to be micromanaged as a person, nor do I like to be micromanaged as my budget. And I think that we oftentimes have made budgeting much more complicated than it is. We use a very clear example of in terms of a model, the 50-20-30 plan. This is a nice way to quickly understand your numbers. You bring home a certain amount of money every month or every 2 weeks. The way that we think about it is no more than 50% of your fixed cost should be more than 50% of your take-home income. So if you bring home $5,000, no more than $2,500 should be going towards fixed costs, things that must get paid, things like mortgage, rent, insurance, food, not going out to eat and having drinks, food, right? So that's your number, and that's very easy, whether you make $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month. That's a rule of thumb. I'm really into, like a sort of a very easy rule of thumb to follow, and that's one of them. So 50% is fixed costs, 30% are your flex. Flexible costs are things, everything else. We want to get your nails done. You want to spend $10 on your latte, go ahead, but just know that you have a number that you need to stick to, and that's that 30%. 20% of your budget should be going towards savings and or investing in retirement accounts, right? A lot of you might have that being taken out of your account already, so that's okay to already be thinking about that in terms of your budget. The 30% though is where you got to watch, right? The 30% is where we end up overspending on credit cards and other things. The problem is that, let's be honest, most of us are not making enough money to cover our monthly costs. And so we end up dipping into credit cards and other things to cover those costs. One of the things that's important, and I think that people spend sometimes too much time looking at their planning their budget instead of actually reflecting on their budget. And what I mean that by that is that you should be downloading, usually every quarter, download your past budget. So what did you actually spend? So how much should you be spending on the 50, 20, 30 plan? And then what you actually spend. And so you're going to have to download your credit cards or your bank accounts. If you are technologically savvy, there's plenty of apps to do this, including ours. Very soon, you'll be able to take a look at what you should be spending to what you actually spend. This just gives you a reality check. That way, if you know that you're spending too much money at a Target or at Starbucks or wherever, you can start to pull back from that. So that's not that complicated. That's budgeting. That's cash flow one-on-one. Pretty simple. 50, 20, 30. Think about it that way, no matter what your budget is. That way you don't have to be thinking too much about where that 30% is, because people spend too much time on the micromanagement of that. So then you can break that down into also 4 weeks. So that's just a nice way to do it. So if you have the 30%, you can break that down into 4 and know how much you should be spending every week. I like neobanks for putting that flexible spending money in to separate your cash. Some people use envelopes. Neobanking is a way to have a separate account where I put all the money that is only for my 30%. And that way I know I'm just spending that money down and it's easy to track. So that's one way. There are many ways. Don't get too over complex on your budgeting. Just make sure that you are also doing a look back. So it's not just forward, but it's also looking back to see where you spend. The next thing that we're going to go over is protecting assets. Don't let an emergency become a crisis. I know that for so many people, when I talk about insurance, it's like probably the most boringest thing ever. But insurance is going to really protect you when you need it. Most of us have car insurance, right? If you have a car, it's just sort of second nature. If you are a renter, you should also have renter's insurance. I live in New York City. Every year, hundreds of families get displaced by fires, and most of them are in low-income communities and they don't have renter's insurance. Fintech has made things like insurance a lot cheaper. Nowadays, there's companies like Lemonade, for example, that offer a renter's insurance plan for anywhere from $15 to $20 a month. So I want you to be protected in every way. There's insurance, obviously, if you have a house, you have to have sort of insurance on your mortgage. Life insurance, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's also another insurance product that's really important. You can also use life insurance as a hedge in terms of savings and investment later on. So if you are in your 20s and 30s, you should get life insurance. It's actually the best time to get it when you're young and healthy, not when you're older and you're ailing. In fact, there's a cutoff. So if you haven't got it by the time that you're 30, you better get on that. So don't let an emergency become a crisis. That's a key thing to remember. And so insurance is going to be a way to protect that. The other thing is an emergency savings. And I know we heard about it earlier. So I'm of the theory that if you have a lot of cash, you should be thinking about investing it more than putting it in a savings account. What you want to have in a savings account is anywhere from 3 months to 6 months of your income. So if you make $3,000 a month, times that by 3, times that by 6. The 3 months is for people, for example, if you don't have any kids, you're, readily sort of, you're young, you can get another job, things like COVID hit and people they ran through their emergency savings or they didn't have one. So we want to try to get you to a nice emergency savings that will be kept in cash, untouchable. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money for most people. Frankly, most people don't have access to $1,000 in emergency savings. So we want to make $1,000 the key. Reach that first. So if you don't have $1,000 yet, start to work on that. Give yourself a timeline and work backwards. So if it's, I want 3 months to have $1,000, that's what you need to do. By the way, this is where the budgeting comes into play. That 30% in the flex budgeting that you're using for day-to-day stuff, if you don't have $1,000 in your savings, then that number needs to be reduced, not to 30%, but to 20%. And 10% then gets put into that savings, okay? Again, these are just very simple ways to manage that money and to build up that savings account. So Again, if you have children, you're looking at more, try to get to 6 months, right? And these are things that you're going to have to look at, and you have to know how much money do you have to have every month. That's your fixed number. For most people, it's rent or mortgage, your car payment and insurance, and some for food. Those are your fixed costs. Everything else is extra. I know, I hate to, it's about deprivation. It feels like it's about deprivation, but it's not. It's really about being able to know the numbers. Once you know it, then you can start to sort of expand on it. So that's your emergency savings. Nowadays, there's so many banks that offer an automated savings account. So automate as much as possible. That way you don't have to think about it. So you can go into your bank account and say, out of every check, move, $100 into my emergency savings until you hit 1,000, and then hit your 6-month goal. After that, I really like to see cash invested, not just sitting in a savings account, because as most of you know, we don't earn that much interest anymore on cash in an account. Most rich people invest; they don't just have cash sitting in their savings account. So that's the second one there. The other piece that's really important to building wealth, and this is that incremental stuff, which is, I call it like credit is king. Taking care of your credit is probably one of the most important things you can do. And like many people, I messed up my credit very early in life, and I've paid for it ever since. It's very expensive to not have a good credit score because we are a credit economy. And credit isn't necessarily bad, but if you don't know how to leverage it appropriately, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Many of you have heard about compound interest. It can work for you or it can work against you. Okay. It works against you when you have credit card debt that's high interest. It can work for you if it's invested, right? I mean, it's very simple. Those are the only two things you need to really understand about compound interest. It works for you, it works against you. When we are talking about credit, and I don't want to get too basic, but there's two kind of verticals: your credit score and your credit report. Let's talk about credit report really quick. It's available for free every year, and you get all three bureaus at freecreditreport.com. And again, all this information is in here. You're going to get access to that. You want to keep an eye on it, not only for making sure that it's being reported correctly, but also in case of anybody that has used your credit profile. That there's lots of opportunity there to get into trouble. So you want to keep an eye on it. So that's your credit report. Credit score is the score that is released by FICO. I think I've seen a lot of this nowadays where people don't know the difference between your FICO score and your general credit score, because there's an educational score that a lot of you guys will get in maybe your Discovery card or your credit. They sort of give you a free score. That's an educational score. It's not the score that they're using when you go to get a home. The FICO score is what you use to go get a mortgage. So you just got to know that. It's okay to track it, but when you start to think about buying a home or property, you want to be looking at your FICO score, and it's separate. Credit score, why is it so important? Because if not, you will be essentially paying a tax for any big purchase. Any asset that you're buying, you will pay more if you don't have a good credit score, whether that's in interest rates or in the amount that you're going to be given in terms of lending. And a lot of small business owners out there forget that when you go to get a business loan, they're looking at your personal credit profile. They're not looking at your business profile. So if you're starting a business and you're thinking about going to a bank to get a loan, you better have your own personal credit together, because that's what's going to be looked at. So those are the two sort of credit report, credit score, making sure that you take care of it. Always know, though, you can hit reset, because I hear a lot of shame from a lot of young women around credit, because guess what? We are targeted as purchasers. We're buyers. We're buyers of Sephora. We're buyers of Target. If you go into any of the shopping big stores, they're offering you credit. That's the wrong kind of credit to get, right? So when we talk about good credit versus bad credit, you want to build a credit score and a credit report with companies like banks and ones that you're going to get points on. I've been talking to people a lot about points. Now, there's a lot of people you can follow to understand more about the points, but the bottom line is that most rich people understand all this and they leverage these things together to sit in first class. That's what I always say. Nobody pays for first class. It's all points. And so learning how to do that correctly will get you a long way. Okay. So that's credit. So, one of the last things I'll talk about is investing, because this is so important to building long-term intergenerational wealth. We talked about having your cash as an emergency savings, an investment, and I mean this in the broadest sense of the word, and we'll talk a little bit about the different kinds of investment, is going to be a lifelong piece of your journey in building wealth. The big saying that I have, it's not how much you invest, it's how long you invest. Okay. And that gets to compound interest. So if you are 20, I want you to start investing now. It could be $10. It could be $20 a week. It could even be just $50 a month. I always joke with girls I know. I was like, if you got money to go get your nails done, you got money to invest. Okay. Because it's essentially $60 a month. That's $60 a month. If you start when you're young enough, is going to compound over time, and you're going to have a little egg by the time you're 35, even if it's just that small, because it's the time, not how much. Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of times we end up starting too late, and you have to then sort of figure out how to actually make up for that time. And that's when you end up having to put more into your accounts, taking a little bit more risk. When we talk about investment, and we talk about retirement, I always joke that retirement is a time in your life. It's not an account. Okay. Because we confuse that oftentimes. There's lots of different retirement accounts. And what we talk about when we say retirement accounts, it's really just about taxes. When you pay the tax man, pay early or you pay later. Uncle Sam always gets his money. Right. So when we talk about tax deferred accounts, it just means that money is not getting taxed right now. It'll get taxed later in retirement after age 59 and a half. So most retirement accounts that you're familiar with are ones attached to your employer, 401k, 403b. And I was just talking to someone earlier that the difference with this generation, I'm talking about millennials and younger, is that back in the day when my parents were working, you had pensions. It was defined. You knew what you were going to get. You put in the time and you were going to get paid and you're going to be taken care of, essentially. That no longer exists. That no longer really exists anymore. There's some industries that have pensions, but very few. Almost everyone has moved over to a 401k, which means the burden is on you. The burden is on you to decide how much to put into your 401k, and the burden's on you to decide how that money is allocated. Because this is a big piece of what I see is missing right now. People might actually contribute, but they don't know how it's allocated. I've asked people many times, what's in your account? What are you investing in your 401k? I don't know. I've never looked at it. Never looked at it. Some people have that stuff in cash and it's sitting in a 401k. So you got to make sure you're also choosing the right funds inside of your 401k. Most 401ks are going to have maybe 10 to 15 types of different funds. You don't buy individual stocks in a 401k at a traditional job. You are buying into funds. A lot of them are called target date funds. And they're basically, a mutual fund or some kind of index fund. And then you want to look at that and see which one you want to invest in. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but you can also get access to our investment boot camp, which is a part of the Thrive campaign, and that's for free. And I'll talk a lot more about how to choose those. That's your 401k, 403b. Make sure to take the match. If your company offers one, you need to take it. That's free money. It's money on the table. And a lot of people oftentimes are embarrassed to ask what it is, and then they don't take it. Basically, your company is matching your dollar contribution. So if you're not contributing, that means you're leaving money on the table. So you want to always contribute as much as the match provides. Okay. Brokerage accounts, really quickly. Actually, sorry, let me step back. IRAs, because this is still part of the retirement account family. IRAs are individual retirement accounts because some of you are either small business owners or freelancers, or you work for a job that doesn't offer a 401k. If any of those are your scenario, you can open up an individual retirement account. And nowadays, it's available through a lot of the robo-advisors online. There's a lot more access to them. You don't have to pay a lot of money to open one up. You just contribute to it. There's some certain rules that we can go over later on in the workshop. IRAs are really important, especially for young folks. You are not going to stay in a job like our parents did for 10, 15, 20 years. You're moving around. You're staying in a job. You're lucky if you're 5 years. That means that you have a 401k that's there, and then you're going to go to a new job, and they're going to have a 401k, and they're going to leave that job. Those 401ks should be rolled over. It's called a rollover. You want them to go into an IRA because you don't want them sitting out there because you're paying fees and maybe you don't know what you're doing in terms of the management. So one of the things that you want to do is consolidate them, and you consolidate them into an IRA. Again, not complicated, but there's a couple of different steps. Also, if you are young and you are making under essentially $125,000, I want you to open up a Roth IRA. Roth IRAs are a great starter investment account. Even if you have a 401k at your job, you can still have a Roth. The difference is this: a Roth is and you put money into a Roth account that's already you pay taxes on. So maybe you have some extra money. So maybe you got some money or you did an extra job, you got paid. You want to put that money into a Roth. A Roth is going to grow tax-free. And I know that we don't appreciate taxes very much, but this is the one place you want to appreciate tax-free. Because guess what? Say you invest in my company, or you give me some money, I put it into a Roth for you, and we invest that money. When you take it out, you won't have to pay taxes on it. That's very different than your 401k. Your 401k, you have to pay taxes on when you take it down. Okay, so we like Roth IRAs. There's something called a backdoor IRA for those of you who make over $125,000. And I really like them, but those are things that we can talk about in the workshop. So those sort of the family of IRAs. Roth, we like them, especially for young people. For those who are older, who make more money, backdoor Roth IRAs are interesting, especially if you want to start putting money away in terms of different investment strategies. And then there's the brokerage accounts. So just very quickly, because so many people understand now that they have access to Robinhood or public.com, they're getting into a lot more brokerage account investing, which is direct investing into equities. I just want people to be careful. Take it slow. Get a little bit of skin in the game. Maybe it's $25. It's $50. I don't want you to be putting your retirement account money into your brokerage account until you really understand what you're doing. And you got to be careful about capital gains tax, because remember, the taxman will always get his money. So I am at time. We have so much more, but we will be talking to people in the workshops after this as well.
Thank you so much, Ramona, for everything that you gave, and for giving us tangible steps and so much fundamental information that sometimes we forget and that we need. Please be sure to check out the Thrive campaign and support. So next up in our lightning talks, we have Francesca Escoto, Black and Brown Founders Director of Education. She will be sharing about bootstrapping. Welcome, Francesca. There's a mic up there. Mm-hmm.
So it's after lunch. Is this okay for recording? No, I need the microphone. Okay, I can do that. All right. It's after lunch and people get sleepy. So please feel free to get up. You can sit on the floor. You can sit wherever you feel comfortable. I want energy, and I want you to be awake and alive as you're listening to the things that I'm going to share. I was told I don't need a PowerPoint, and I don't know how to live without PowerPoints. So I'm going to do my best to share some goods and to be the show instead of having the slides that usually accompany me. So as my introductor shared, I'm Francesca Escoto, and I am Director of Education for Black and Brown Founders. I came in at the very beginning when ANIA wanted to build curriculum and provide something for our community to be able to start their businesses and launch new ventures that were kind of reinventing the landscape for Black and Brown folk. And so my background, I'm actually an engineer by trade. And for those of you that know Ania, she's an opera singer by trade. So it was a perfect marriage. We came in and she did the artsy thing and I did the spreadsheets and it all worked out. One of the things that drove me to entrepreneurship myself, I'm a serial entrepreneur is how I define myself. And my first venture was building software to track the performance of aircraft engines. We did super well for 2 years. We grew too fast. I had zero idea what I was doing as a recent grad. So we ended up closing the company, but then I was bitten by the bug. I couldn't go back. I still maintained a career because I always say that my employer is my angel investor and they're financing the growth of my business. So don't worry about having a job. You're still an entrepreneur if you're doing that on the side. But I stayed in industry. I did move around and tried different things. I have owned various kinds of enterprises, from franchises and fitness. You couldn't tell, but I did own a gym. I've done from being your Mary Kay lady and learned a whole lot about sales and interpersonal relationships there, to eventually coming back to technology and deciding that I wanted to manage implementation projects for software and that I wanted to coach. So I became a certified coach, and in all of that journey, 25 years of doing all that, we pour that into our bootstrapping bootcamp. Now, the topic here is money, right? And so we're all trying to figure out, what does money look like? How do we use money? How do we make the most out of money? I have an interesting relationship to me with money. I love it and I hate it. And I think it loves me and hates me back. And part of that is because we have built a lot of systems around money. And we have put dollar value on things that to me should not have one. I have to buy water, right? And so when we start thinking of macroeconomics and the way that that impacts life, not only here, but in other places throughout the world, I find that we have used money in ways that is not humane. Okay. And so I think money is angry also at being used that way. I like to think of it that way. So let's start there and let's talk about money as an exchange of energy. Okay. And so when you work an hourly job and you get paid $25 an hour, then 1 hour of your time and effort, whatever that is equal to $25. So when you go to the store and you purchase something for $25, you are essentially exchanging an hour of life for that item. And so in other times, it would be chickens or it would be beads or different things. And so the effort portion was not always so correlated, right? You weren't exchanging time and life for goods. I'm not saying that we need to go back to the Amazon. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I think I want to do that. It might be a little more freeing, but the mosquitoes and I wouldn't make it. So I'm still trying to figure out how to make it here. And I'm going to stick to that for some time, excuse me. But I'm really curious about, how do we build something that is more profitable, where I don't have to tie my life to the production or the acquisition of goods, and I can live a life that is a bit richer, even if it means less money. Okay, so with that in mind, we set out to build the bootcamp. And when you think about it, our real unlimited resource is time, not money. So what we should be guarding with so much zealousness, if that's a word, is our time. That's the thing that we do run out of. That is the one resource that we don't even control fully, because we don't know how long we're going to be here. And so every minute that I'm here, what I want, my true definition of wealth, is having 100% control over my time. It is freedom to use my time as I please. So people who can do that are the freest people, and in essence, the wealthiest people. They are not dependent on dollars to use their time as they wish. Okay, so What does that have to do with entrepreneurship? Well, entrepreneurship is an opportunity to create systems in a new world, even if it's a micro world, where the rules change. Because you start valuing your time and your services and your goods in a way that aligns with who you are and the kind of life you want, not only for yourself, but for your employees. So you start creating community. And this is how you change culture. You're starting when you are launching a new venture, you are defying cultural norms around money, the value of time, the value of people, and the value of the resources that you can create collectively. So, when we're thinking of bootstrapping, then why bootstrap? If I can make such an impactful change in the world through a business, why should I be bootstrapping instead of pursuing venture capital? So this is where you get to participate. Why would you bootstrap instead of pursuing venture capital? To be secure, why would you be more secure bootstrapping? So you're thinking of literally the process of tying that shoe on and keeping it on your person so it feels more secure. Okay. Does someone have insight into why bootstrapping might be more secure? Less of a risk. That's really interesting. Why? Not as many moving parts. You're in more control because the stuff is right in front of you. Sure. I'll take one more before I give you my take. Yeah. You don't have obligations to investors. Tell me, that's what you were going to say? Yeah. So, what is venture capital? And we're going to tie it back to that. Who can tell me what venture capital is? Yes. When someone funds your business on the ground floor, that always sounds sexy because people imagine that to be like, I got a grant or a scholarship or something. They gifted me money and now I can run free through the meadows. Is that what that means? No. What does it mean? They are actually purchasing a portion of your business. So when you get venture capital, you are in some ways, not in some ways, in a very practical way, selling a portion of your company. And they're going to come back and say, okay, for 25% or for 35% or 5% or whatever, I am willing to give you this much money. Now, what happens is if you do that too early, you end up compromising all these amazing values we were just talking about because now you have to please this co-owner. And their interests, venture capitals in particular, their interests are very different. They're looking for companies that are going to grow really fast and that are going to follow this particular pattern. And given what you're trying to do, if you're trying to create wealth of a different type, then that might not be the perfect match, especially not at the beginning. At Black and Brown Founders, we are not against venture capital. We are pro profitability. And our goal for you is that you have a profitable business that is making real dollars, selling things or services, and that later on it is so sexy that somebody is going to want to come and invest in your business. They're going to come looking for you because of your success. Instead of you pimping yourself out, on hope and selling your soul at the beginning when you haven't yet proven that your model works. And so bootstrapping for us became the way to build this boot camp because we wanted people to be able to build and grow organically based on these values, creating real wealth, and then worry about venture capital at a later point in time. So remember that when you're building a business, you have the opportunity to redefine work for yourself and for the people that you're employing, which means you're creating these ecosystems. Ideally, they're self-sustaining, but they can also be self-propagating because nothing prevents you from them becoming that angel investor that helps continue the model from spread, not from spreading, but to spread in your circle. Okay, I'm gonna sit now. One, because my asthma is on point today, and I run out of air. But let me give you a little bit of statistics, and then I want to hear from you all. For businesses that start with venture capital, 98% of them fail in the first 5 years. Okay? However, when you're bootstrapping, who knows what the success rate is usually for businesses in the United States in the first 5 years? It's about 50% actually. Yeah. And so, although 50-50 sounds kind of sucky, is way better than 2%. It sure is, right? But what happens, that 2% that does get funding and that does succeed looks really cool on the magazines and in the news, and they got $8 billion valuation, or, trust me, you don't want to be Uber these days, but regardless, it sounds better. So when clients come to us and they're like, I want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, I want to make $1 million this year. I'm like, are you making 200,000? Oh, no, I'm not. Well, you want to? Because I can help you do that. I can help you get to 300,000. I can help you get to 500,000. And it's going to change your life. But no, you're not going to be a millionaire just yet. You can get there, right? But instead of trying to go that VC route where you ramp up real quick, but then you can crash and burn, how about we do something that might be a little slower, but is sustainable, and you have increased chances of success. And what we're finding is that people that go through our program are getting to 200,000 to 300,000, 500 within 2 years of being on the program, because they're growing organically and they're able to sustain that longer term. So I know it's a lightning talk and I'm supposed to talk for 15 minutes, but I think I said a whole lot. Any questions or thoughts you might want to share? I can always say more. Yes.
I appreciate your bootstrap. I did bootstrap, and I couldn't get venture capital. I don't own 100% of the company, so it works.
Yeah, it sure works, especially when you own 100% of that. One of the things that has made the Jewish community so successful globally, but in the United States, is that they circulate that dollar among their community. Right? And so once a dollar enters the Jewish community, they fund programs, they help each other out, and they make sure that the dollar stays in the community that built them. So when we do this, right, and we decide to keep that dollar circulating in whatever community it is that you're building, then you are, in essence, funding or funneling that funding back into the vision. Okay. And so even if you don't get the venture capital you need, you still have that gold nugget that is continuing to grow. Yeah.
So the last speaker, we were hearing about the ratio of 50, 20, 30.
Yes.
How much is, how do we know that we have enough, or from what part is the money coming for the bootstrapping? Like how much money should we be investing in that?
So that's a great question. And Ramona and I have great conversations about this all the time. So, and definitely go to her other workshop to get more. But let me differentiate the investment dollars that she was talking about. You can take that same 10%, right? And invest and increase your savings, or that 20% into investments. You can put it into a business. Okay. So the business you invest in can be yours. Okay. Now here's the thing. With the internet today, the cost of starting a business is so low. We're not talking about building aircraft engines or launching new drugs, okay? But like the typical business or the most common businesses, you can start with so little that that's the beauty of it. People will come to me and say, well, I want to start a restaurant. Okay, fantastic. What do you want to sell? Oh, well, the menu doesn't matter. I just have this idea. And I think that if I can just get $50,000, I can get it started. It's like, well, we're actually going to do things differently here. I want to know what the one meal or dish is that is going to distinguish you from everybody else. I need you to find a way to test that one meal in the marketplace and make sure that people will buy it. And when you start making money in your pocket, profit from that one meal, then we can talk about opening a restaurant. And so when you go in that direction, you realize you don't need the 50,000. You might need 500. And who can't put 500 together over 2 months with a friend and a credit card? I didn't just say credit card here. Don't tell Ramon I said that, right? But I'm just saying when you start thinking of prototyping and starting with the simplest form of your most valuable product or your minimum viable product, then it opens up a whole new can of opportunity for launching and growing something that can literally put money in your pocket much faster, even if it's not millions of dollars. Oh, yes? Was someone raising their hand? Yes. My lunch partner. Yes.
I heard you say that you didn't say credit cards, but although that could be an option sometimes, I think it's important to look at the interest rate on the credit card.
Yes.
On your ROI.
Mm-hmm.
And if your return on investment is going to be less than that credit card expense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've seen too many young folks get in trouble with
yeah.
credit cards, but I know I didn't.
That's fantastic. So here's my sister, right? I'm older than my siblings by a lot. I won't say how much, but my sister's the baby and she's 26. I am not 26 or 30. But she comes to me and she's like, I want to start a candle business. Okay, fantastic. You want to start a candle business? Yeah, she came to me for investments and she wanted me to invest $500 in her candle business. I'm like, I don't know that that's what you want from me. Because if I'm putting 100% of the dollars into a business that you've never run before, I am going with $500. I'm going to own like 70% of this thing. Okay. And I'm the first one that gets paid back. I was like, in this case, let's find a credit card that makes sense for you because it's not worth asking for an investor. She was all prepared with her little PowerPoint, all cute. I'm like, and plus, what you need to do is make 5 candles and sell them. She wanted to get like all this equipment and, all this other stuff. I'm like, no, make 5 candles, sell them and see what feedback you get. You don't even need to start with $500. So again, sometimes we think we need the cash to get started, but that's because we haven't given ourselves the opportunity to start at the smallest level and then grow from there.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Francesca Scotto.
Thank you all.
We're ready. Thank you for speaking to the value of bootstrapping. It's the life that I'm living and have lived. And to the value of our time, because we get money back, but we do not get time back. Next up in our lightning talks today, we have Naja Yasmin Daniels, Community Manager, ICC, and Astrid Schultz, Zebra United founder and leader in the ICC. They will be speaking about trauma-informed finance. Whew, child. Thank y'all.
Hello, can you hear me now? Hi, good afternoon, everyone who is joining us both in person and virtually. My name is Naja Yasmin Daniels, pronoun she, her, ella, and I am the former community manager of the Inclusive Capital Collective, but the current founding CEO. And we'll talk a little bit more about my journey as we continue to talk about the trauma-informed finance work that we have been building over the last 2 years. My work in this field started through my own personal experience with trauma. Being a quote unquote systems kid, I grew up in the state of New York and was adopted at an early age. And then when my parents passed away, or my adoptive parents passed away, I ended up becoming a parent to my younger siblings. And that experience through the systems that I've both worked and lived in has influenced how I show up in the work that I do today. I've been blessed and honored to spend 15 years working in the state, local, and national level of politics. But after the 2020 election, it became very evident that the trauma, pain, loss, and grief that our country and world was experiencing collectively needed more support. So I decided to become my own Black and Brown founder and founding Twice as Good LLC, which is a social impact and trauma informed firm that actually coaches individuals and institutions on how to create post traumatic growth. So through that work, I was honored to reconnect with Zebras Unite, where my right hand here, Dr. Astrid Schultz, is the founder of Zebras Unite Cooperative, to continue this work in a way that was bringing folks back in a holistic way to their humanity, actually bringing people along this journey where our work and our personal lives are no longer separated due to COVID, due to the racial reckonings that we were experiencing throughout our country, not only with the constant death of Black lives, but the mistreatment of Latinos and Caribbeans at the border, with Native American women and girls being stolen and killed. We could no longer act like these things weren't affecting our day to day, our mental, as well as how we were able to show up or not show up to work. So it is my honor to pass the mic to, again, my right hand, Dr. Schultz, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Astrid Schultz. My pronouns are she, her, doctor, or Frau Doktor in my native Germany. I am a recovering nonprofit executive turned tech founder turned accidental co-founder of a global movement called Zebras Unite, which is a founder-centric and led movement to create the capital, community, and culture that we need to build the businesses that are better for the world. I, among other things, serve as Zebras Unite's lead of capital. And essentially, the ICC is our intervention in the US. When we first started with Zebras Unite, we wrote a manifesto, four of us who have very mixed life experience, but all were women entrepreneurs left out of the capital system as it stands today. And when we created Zebras Unite, people immediately asked us, well, are you going to create a fund? How can I invest in Zebras? And we looked around the US and said, you know what? There are hundreds of entrepreneurs who happen to be innovating around capital in and for and by their communities. So we don't need to stand up a new fund. We just need to we just need to figure out how to support all the great capital entrepreneurs who are creating these instruments for BIPOC communities, for refugees communities, immigrant communities, you name it. And so out of that basic thinking was born the Inclusive Capital Collective. And that was a much drier self-introduction than you do. It's one of the things I learned from Naja is to lean into our lived experience. But I will just say she's been my teacher. It's been wonderful working on this concept together that we're now calling trauma-informed finance. And I think maybe that's where we go next.
Yes. So one of my core values is transparency. So of course you'll see me looking down on my phone because this is where our outline is. And we also wanted to save trees today. So when we're talking about trauma-informed finance, the long and the short of it, as you can see, I'm quite short, being 5'2", and Astrid's quite tall, being 6'3", if I'm not mistaken. We have discovered that trauma-informed finance requires identifying the harms that have happened in the past when it comes to not only systems but individuals, and how we can utilize that information, whether it's qualitative or quantitative data, to actually move forward in alternative financial mechanisms. So at the Inclusive Capital Collective, we created a space where folks are safe, secure, and seen to actually share their brilliance and their experience. And as we know, brilliance comes in many ways, a lot of times through lived, labored, or learned experience. However, how many times do we get an opportunity to speak about our lived and learned experiences in these spaces? So some of the mechanisms that we do that by is our Black papers, for example, not white papers, because again, this is the brilliance of Black and brown minds, and we're sharing our lived, labored, and learned experience. So over the past 18 months, we've had the opportunity to publish 3 Black papers, one on real estate, one on manufacturing, and our last Black paper that we just launched last week on character-based lending, or what we call at the Inclusive Capital Collective, relationship trust-based lending. So it's essential for us that we're able to not only identify our traumas and harm, but educate the ecosystem and bring you all along with us so we share the same language and taxonomy when we're talking about this. No longer can we afford to speak above or below each other. It's time to meet each other where we are. And how we do that is by language. Astrid, what are some of your thoughts?
I'm collecting a thought that may be a little bit controversial coming out of this morning session. In a way, you could say the Inclusive Capital Collective picks up where Pamela and Ramona left off, right? So when you remember their talks, they are very much, I don't want to say accepting the current financial system, but they were speaking within the confines of the prevailing paradigms and frameworks, be that in lending, be that in how you grow your business through revenue, be that in venture investing in equity forms, all of which is great. Like what the work, that is such important work, right? To empower more people with the knowledge to navigate the existing system. In the ICC, we sort of say, yeah, we're kind of done with the existing system. I mean, the purpose of the ICC is literally, and as we say, right, to overcome systemic racism through equitable access to capital. See how we can do this? We'll be here all day. But seriously, right? Like it's the statistics just bear this out, right? Like 2% of venture goes to women. If you're a woman of color, it's 1% of venture capital. 85% of bank lending goes to people who don't look like anybody in this room. Well, actually, like that guy, right? 85% of bank lending. Sorry, no. You and I are the equity in this conference, the diversity in this conference. No, but seriously, like the statistics bear this out, right? So the existing instruments of finance are not as accessible to founders of color as we need them to be. And so that's where we sort of pick up at the ICC to say, well, if finance is broken, like we need to actually fix finance, right? And that's the trauma-informed bit. Like if you're actually responsive to the trauma that has been experienced by entirely too many populations in this country, then we need to build new tools and new products that go beyond venture and that go beyond mainstream banking. And that's sort of some of the products we've been building. You mentioned the relationship-based lending. So in the ICC, we have, I don't know, a dozen or so loan funds that are using something other than the 5 C's of credit for their underwriting practice. And they're beginning to scale to the low double-digit millions. And the ICC takes a point of view of like, well, how do we help those innovators mobilize more capital through those products? And so then what we do at the ICC is to say, well, what's the next thing we can do to help all those existing loan funds? So for example, one of the first things we're creating is a credit enhancement facility. And this is where it gets a little bit wonky. We sometimes joke, you bring the trauma, I bring the finance. We can talk a lot more about like the specific products that need building to unlock capital and build new plumbing to drive it into the communities that need it most through the people who are building these community investment vehicles. So
yes. When we're speaking about our products in the Inclusive Capital Collective, it also makes me think of our opportunity to be the friends and the family support when it comes to capital that many of our practitioners do not have. As we talked about this morning, Black and Brown entrepreneurs and founders especially do not have that luxury or safety net always where we can ask our family and friends for hundreds of thousands of dollars. At the Inclusive Capital Collective, we work with foundations and institutions that are able to provide hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to actually allocate those funds where they deserve to be. So through our regranting facility, we were able to grant 7 organizations, including Black and Brown founders, with unrestricted funds based on what they wanted to achieve and accomplish, because we understand that Black and Brown entrepreneurs are not risky. We are willing to take more risk. We also understand that our success is directly tied to our survival, yet again, making us willing to take more risk. So when we're able to support organizations like Black and Brown founders to create a pipeline fund that allows other entrepreneurs to receive access to capital and not have to put on a front or a mask and actually come in with authenticity and be the leaders that they're looking to be, that's the work that we're trying to do. Not trying to do, that's the work that we're doing. So thank you. And it requires help from everyone, not just us. Astrid?
Yeah, that's such a good example of how we like to do things differently. Anybody here ever applied to a foundation for a grant?
Whew.
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to 10, how traumatic was that? 100? 20? Okay. Right. And that's generally what it's like, because people who tend to look like me have logic models and theories of change about communities that look more like you all. Right. And that's a problem. So what we did at the ICC was to say, what if we took a bunch of money and had the people who already know what's needed in communities of color make the decisions about who gets them? And how about we make that? I think our proposal process was like, here's a Google form, fill in what you need, how much you need, what time period you need it for, and send us your C3 determination letter from the IRS so we know you're legit, and tell us where to send the money. Right? Like that was it. And then we had a committee of ICC members, right? It wasn't me for Zebras Unite. It was a group of ICC members who decided who got this initial allocation that we had set aside for this regranting facility. And now what we want to do is just multiply that by 1,000 roughly and keep doing that kind of thing to make it easy and lower the transaction costs for organizations like Black and Brown founders that are working with entrepreneurs directly. Ooh, I'm liking the sound effects. Working with them directly to make to support them and to make that easier, right? So that's more of what's coming ahead.
Yeah. How I like to identify the Inclusive Capital Collective is the intersections of finance, movement building, as well as system change strategy, because all 3 of those are required in order to move forward trauma-informed finance. I also want to thank you all who are here today, because it takes a lot to want to join a conversation where we're speaking about trauma, especially if that's your everyday lived experience. So at the ICC, we also incorporate somatics and breath work in our conversations, in our thought leadership, in the work that we do, because we also understand that we must first take care of ourselves before we go out and take care and lead with other people. One other thing that I want to add is, when we're speaking about ownership and autonomy, the Inclusive Capital Collective is actually doing this by being or incorporating into a cooperative. Now, if you know the history of Black and Brown folks and our ancestry, this is not new to us. This is very true to us. And we're now bringing it back. We're remembering, and we're bringing on allies in action. And what I mean by that is folks that are willing to take risk with Black and Brown folks who have to take risk every day. We're not looking for white saviors or any handouts. We are very capable of doing and accomplishing what we do and accomplish. However, it should not be on our backs and on our blood. So that's a call to action for folks who may not identify as BIPOC, but may have other intersectional identities. We want to intersect and connect with you, but we can no longer be on the front lines without you.
Front lines. That is very much what it feels like.
All the time, Astrid.
All the time. So what superpower I bring to this relationship and to the work of trauma-informed finance is that I speak the language of philanthropy. I speak the language of investing. And my job is to, help translate what we're talking about here in ways that our counterparts at, financial institutions like Wells Fargo can understand. Wells Fargo has a bit of a sordid history with the Black community and brown communities,
Yes.
and they keep getting egg on their faces. And we're having some very hard and difficult conversations with them about how it's not enough to give a grant to an organization like ICC, but how do you actually show up as an ally in practice and put your own career on the risk to advance ideas that may feel a little alien. It's like, really, you show up to a finance meeting, we're going to do some breath work. That gets a reaction every time we do it because people are not used to it in those rooms, right? But it's actually a nice illustration because just as we were waiting to come in, we call him our Trojan banker. He's sort of a banker inside Wells Fargo whose job it is basically to accelerate our work inside this, smallish local banking institution. And we had a very specific request for him. We said, look, we have this other product that is getting to be market ready, and it's going to be a little bit wonkish. Anybody here familiar with new market tax credits? Yeah, I see some nods, some shaking heads, some raised hands. I won't go into details. It's a government program, a treasury program that basically trades capital gains taxes for corporations and parlays them into investment dollars into underserved census tracts. There's a technical definition of what census tracts apply. And so it turns out a lot of our practitioners in the ICC who are using real estate strategies to build community wealth, not surprisingly, find themselves in zip codes that actually qualify for this program. But this program, like so many government programs, and I'm not looking at our friend at the EDA in the back row, but government programs have their own access challenges, right? They're very technical, hard to navigate, and you will be shocked to hear that most of the intermediation of new market tax credit investments is done by middle-aged white guys in consulting practices that specialize in that. And so we have one of those guys as an ally in practice in the ICC with whom we've now built, essentially, or beginning to build, a new market tax credit pipeline of ICC projects. And you can quickly, the real estate quickly adds up into the tens and hundreds of millions. And if the ICC takes a few basis points on those transactions, very quickly you actually end up in a self-sustaining organization that really begins to act like a cooperatively owned investment bank. And that's sort of the point here. It is owned by the BIPOC owned and led organizations that are doing this work of mobilizing capital for their communities. And the new market tax credit is one of the government programs that we're looking to hack, essentially, and tap to unlock more capital. So that's the next, like the credit enhancement facility is one. The re-granting facility is one. New market tax credit pipeline is a second. And then a credit enhancement facility for the sorts of character-based or relationship-based loan funds is a third product that we're launching out of the ICC this fall.
Yeah. A question that I get often when folks hear about the ICC and the trauma-informed work that we're doing in our products, they're like, how? How did you do it? How are you doing it? Full transparency yet again. We have spent the last 2 years building trust and accountability and work cadence with each other digitally, virtually. Again, full transparency. I'm a proud Black Latina millennial, and majority of my members do not identify as that. So building trust as a young leader to be able to help folks who have identified trauma maybe before I was even born. The beauty and the essence and the necessity of us coming together as folks who are elder and younger to have conversations about the traumas that actually aren't so different or haven't changed. I know for Black and brown communities in particularly, COVID is not the first time we have experienced experience loss and devastation in our communities. However, COVID was the first time that folks were willing and able to listen to us and how we've been able to survive and thrive throughout decades and actually become stronger in our communities. So in the Inclusive Capital Collective, we have over 250 members. Majority identify as Black, Brown, or any sort of BIPOC as we use nowadays. Also, we are in every state in the country, which means that this trauma-informed work, this community building, this opportunity to access equitable access is available in your state. We also work around the clock when it comes to how we are able to support each other in the work that we're doing. We understand that connections are important. So when we're speaking about capital, we're not only talking about that friendly hard cash we're looking for community capital, relational capital, spiritual capital. We're looking for an opportunity to bring all of our gifts together and move forward.
Occurs to me that we have the 3 Ps, right? So we have products of trauma-informed finance, we have processes around them, and increasingly we have the platform, right? Whether that is an advocacy platform to come together under the umbrella of the Inclusive Capital Collective to lean on existing institutions, be they private or be they government or public, and we have the people, I guess maybe it's 4P, right, who are beginning to support each other and who aggregate around these themes. And do you want to take some questions?
Oh yes, I'll be happy to. Yeah, happy to. Yes,
because I think there might be some.
I just want to start by saying I applaud you. Kudos to you. I am of the generation probably of Ramona and Pamela. And in our defense, we probably just didn't have this kind of network. So it is so refreshing to see. You know, I think I mentioned in another session, I came through as the only. That's coming up the hard way. So I am just so inspired by what you're doing. Naja made a comment about community. Back in the days of my parents and grandparents who were entrepreneurs, they financed each other. We financed within our community. But we can't keep knocking on the doors these days to someone else saying, give us a piece of your pie, when they're wondering why we're not baking our own. We're baking our own pie, thanks to people like you. Kudos to you. I'm excited. I want to go out there and tell all those other folks that they should be in here hearing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just one quick question. In terms of sources of revenue, I heard tax credit, I heard banks. Are we tapping into other minority-owned businesses, for example? Because I would think it would be a great place to invest.
Yeah, so maybe to put a point on the membership of the ICC are predominantly community financial organizations writ large, right? Be they emerging funds, be they Black or Brown run CDFIs. So it's more like a B2B play. Like, although we do think increasingly, I mean, Naja, talk more about how you've been thinking about sort of the education component, because, well, of course, not surprisingly, what we find out, to your point, I'm of your generation, right? Like this way of thinking is new in finance, right? And we kind of want to take the CEO of, Wells Fargo to the woodshed for private training on trauma-informed finance. Can you help? Good. But talk more about how you're thinking about how the trauma-informed part of this approach really permeates all layers, and how we think about turning that into an educational offering.
Yes, thank you for the question and the accolades I receive. First and foremost, we have to go back to remembering the cooperative dynamics of how we work together and why that is necessary. There's such a fear of the scarcity mindset and folks being fear of working in abundance. And it's important that we're able to identify that we can't do this work alone, and we have to identify other folks' talents and leadership qualities that can help move this work forward. But that requires artists, that requires requires designers, that requires environmentalists, that requires financial folks, that requires people like me who work in politics and movement space. Like, it's all of us. So what we've been designing at the Inclusive Capital Collective is this map of where can people feel seen and supported, but also where's their role. Everyone who is, I believe, and again, this goes back to my Indigenous Faith of Africa teachings, but your purpose, you're here for a reason, you're here to serve a purpose. Sometimes you may need support in finding that purpose and moving that purpose forward. So in the Inclusive Capital Collective, that's another layer of how we're able to do that for one another, not only educating each other what's happening in the markets, but educating each other on how to live in liberated leadership and not be afraid to show your authentic self. Yes.
I have a quick question. Growing up, lot of people wanted a bank account. Once my mom was a tax accountant for Sunoco, so I identify with the job matching with the 401k. So my mom told me about that. But she also, from her job, we were put into a credit union. And one thing I kept hearing through the growing up, because I'm 47, is don't go to banks because banks don't finance us. I shy away from banks, and my business is currently with Freedom Credit Union. I also have followed another young man on Instagram, and he had different credit unions you could go that do fund Black and brown people. So what are your ideals versus banks and credit unions?
Plus 1,000 to the credit unions. I mean, among other things, credit unions are cooperatively owned, right? And so they're already predestined, right, to share the wealth, right, with their members, even though it may just show up as a little dividend in your account, right? But I'm totally with you. And we're doing from the Zebra Sinai perspective now. The ICC it's our flagship of this approach in the US in terms of how we create the new capital ecosystem that we need, right? As entrepreneurs, as investors, just as regular folks, right? Who want better financing as part of their experience. But it became essentially a prototype for how we approach sort of the various gaps in access to capital that entrepreneurs of all different stripes, have to stay on brand, are experiencing. And so we're actually doing a project sort of similar in style with the National Co-op Bank to figure out how we can drive more capital into cooperatively owned businesses. Of whatever ilk, like be they your local food co-op or be they a platform co-op, a tech co-op, right? There's so many, Uber, right? Like Uber could be owned by the drivers and the passengers, right? Like something like Uber could be, or like Facebook actually could be a co-op. It's not. Clubhouse could and should be a co-op, in my opinion, right? So there's a bunch of interesting new ideas for using the co-op structure. And guess what, right? Those co-ops have a really hard time getting financing, even from co-op financial institutions. But those institutions are much more predisposed to innovate than sort of the regular financial institutions. And I have this sort of little like monster mashup in my head going like, who's going to get there first, the National Co-op Bank or Wells Fargo, in terms of actually putting some innovative new scalable mechanisms in place? But yay, credit unions.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I'm curious, since you have this membership structure and folks who are coming in at different levels, and you're working with folks like Wells Fargo, what are some of the ways that you put into practice to kind of share power and make sure everyone's coming with an equal voice?
It's not equal, it's an equitable voice.
Thank you. Yes, equity is the name of the game. So we meet monthly virtually, which is in person for us, through our mastermind calls, where we have representatives from various states share I'm losing my train of thought, share their projects, share what they're looking for, as well as build other projects together in coalition. That's how some of our organizations like Black Squirrel Collective was able to come together in Philadelphia and receive the funding and support they needed to actually launch tomorrow, which we're very excited about. Yes, clap that up for Black Squirrel Collective. Literally October last year, we were at the Science Center for our Rebirth of Slick real estate event. So I'm grateful to be back for a second year. But also we have a digital platform called Hilo that we utilize, I would say almost 24/7, because it allows us to in real time connect, have ask and offers, and also share events and other connections that are going on throughout the ecosystem. Another piece I would add to that is, instead of having office hours, which we did try, we have emotional intelligent hours, because I have members who call me in the morning, in the evening, who have had some very disturbing conversations with investors or individuals that are on their staff that don't know if they can continue to do this work together. And to your question on how do I meet people, or how do we as ICC leadership meet people where they are, is actually by meeting people where they are. One of our mastermind calls, I mentioned triggers, and one of my Trojan white male counterparts, who's in his 60s, politely said, and I was grateful for his vulnerable strength, "Naja, I am a 60-something-year-old white man. I am not sure what you mean by triggers." And at that moment, I realized that I wasn't meeting him where he was. And as someone who is an active ally in our coalition, it was essential for me to break that down, which is why the ICC started its own dictionary to speak about things like white supremacy, to speak about things like anti-Blackness, to speak about what a white supremacy beneficiary looks like. Because again, calling in my non-BIPOC brothers and sisters, whether or not you had slaves or your family had slaves, you still benefit from a system today that will always benefit you. So again, check your privilege, but that's for everybody. I have to check my privilege as well. So it's essential that we find space and time not only to connect in person and virtually, but whenever something's happening, the communication network is so strong within the ICC that you have community wherever you are. And we're just grateful that it happens to be nationally now.
I have one job and one job only at the ICC, and that is to amplify Naja. It's very simple. And sometimes to sharpen a point, right? Like, I mean, part of your question is about, like, how do you share power? How do you distribute power in the ICC? And the answer is, if you want to shift power, just shift power already, right? So everybody here is probably familiar with a nonprofit structure, or is familiar with a C Corp or an S Corp, or you have an LLC. Well, this thing is headed, it's already at 250 members, right? And an LLC, you can only have a max of 99 members, right? So we know we need something bigger. That something bigger is a cooperative structure, a multi-stakeholder cooperative. And guess what you can do? You can have different shareholder classes. Again, Shevis, please close your ears, because you can do what we are intending to do, which is you can have a shareholder class that says, are you BIPOC owned and led? It's a simple question, right? Like, what's your ownership structure? Is it 51% or more BIPOC owned? Or is if you're a nonprofit, is your leadership, are your officers, you have to have 3 officers, are 2 out of them BIPOC? It's not a hard question, right? And then that can sit, those owner members of the ICC can, that's the thinking, the current thinking is, sit in a different shareholder class than organizations that are not that, right? And then you can have a separate shareholder class maybe for individuals or for whomever. And then you can vest differential power and responsibility in different shareholder classes. That's what we do at Zebras Unite under a different rubric of how we've organized ourselves. Hello, co-founder over there. So Ania and I, for example, are part of a doula class. It's a class of 4, and that has its own shareholder class that is actually designed to sunset. So we're writing ourselves out of existence. I know no male founder would ever do that, but we're doing it. And so you have incredible flexibility with the co-op structure and your bylaws on how you organize governance. And so that's what we're doing. And so there will be a little bit of education involved when we're actually bringing in, at the moment, anybody who comes to the website gets to call themselves a member of the ICC, and we welcome you, and you should go there. It's inclusive-capital.us. You should sign up and you should become a member. At the moment, you're more like an affinity member. But the intention is to convert you into card-carrying members and shareholders of the ICC. And then you will be sitting in one or more of the shareholder, or one of several shareholder classes. And then we can vest different power in those shareholder classes. And the other thing we've already done is we've stood up an investment committee that is going to make those decisions. And that's actually one of the questions they're grappling with, is who gets access to the ICC capital products, and how do we regulate that? Do you have to be a member or not? Can you be a friend? Yada yada, right? So that's the crunchy in the weeds work of just shift the power already.
Any other questions? Let's give it up for Ashley. I wanna put some respect on your names real quick. Thank you so much, Ashid and Naja, for the work that you're doing, reimagining. So much of it is corrective work. So much of it is revolutionary, and so much of it, unfortunately, people would deem radical. So thank you so much, so much for that. Thank you for that. And I know they dropped so many gems and said so many powerful things. And if anything resonated with you, please hashtag Chroma 2022. Thank you, Ashrid, and thank you, Naja. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Next up, switching gears a little bit, we talked about how to help you save some money. Next up, we're going to be hearing from someone coming from my field, Alessia Bani, innovation reporter of The Plug, how to get your venture visibility in media. Welcome, Alessia. Actually, there's a mic up there. Okay.
You want me to sit on the couch and chat?
Yeah,
or
stand. Sit on the couch.
Whatever's comfortable for you. Okay, I can stand.
Okay.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm taking a second to get situated. Thank you all for joining me. I know it's kind of the mid-afternoon slump and everyone's kind of tired, so I appreciate you all being here. Also, can everyone see me okay? I know I'm super tiny and I'm over kind of like a large podium.
If you want to stand up, let's see.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start off here because I have a few notes that I want to make sure I have right and get the data points to you all. So thank you for that super awesome intro. Again, my name is Alessia Bani, and I'm an innovation reporter with The Plug. For anyone that's never heard of The Plug before, we're a digital news outlet that covers the Black innovation economy. So our content is kind of twofold. There's two reporters. One is me. I'm based here in Philly, and I cover the Black tech ecosystem in and around the city. And my colleague covers HBCU innovation, so all news that comes out of HBCUs across the nation. And The Plug is a startup itself. It was started in 2016 by our CEO, Sherelle Dorsey. She is super incredible, and we're a team of 5. So a lot of the work that we report on about startups, about founders, we're going through it ourselves. So it's super cool to be in this position. So today we're going to talk about how to get your venture visibility in media. So that is a super important thing because a lot of times people are doing incredible work and it's just not getting exposure. So how do you get exposure? So I want to start off with 2 questions, if everyone doesn't mind. The first one is, can you raise your hand if you've ever talked to a member of the media before? Awesome. That's quite a few hands. Okay. Now, the second question is, can you raise your hand if you think you're doing something, some sort of work that should be getting exposure in the media? Okay, interesting. So by the end of this presentation, I hope that everyone is able to raise their hand to that second question, because everyone here is doing some sort of work that deserves celebration and exposure, not only for the impact that you're making, but for showing other people in your community that they can do it too. And that's one of the greatest things that I've learned doing this job. I've been with the plug for a few months now, and I personally don't have a background in tech or innovation. My background is in journalism, so I've been able to kind of come into these spaces and really listen and learn. And that's something I've really heard is one, that folks want their work to be heard, but also they want other people to hear about their work so they can say, hey, I can do this too. And it makes it a little bit easier for the next person along. So, you guys, most of you raised your hands that you have talked to the media, but that's a little bit unusual. So there's usually a lot of deterrence to why people have never spoken to the media. I think one is that people feel uncomfortable or intimidated to talk to a member of the media. And often in Black and Brown communities, it's because the mainstream media historically has ignored these voices. And if they haven't ignored them, they've misrepresented them, creating this mistrust, an understandable mistrust. So to pull in a bit of data, the Pew Research Center, they conducted a survey in 2018, and they surveyed a few thousand Americans, and they asked, have you ever spoken or been interviewed by a local journalist? So the results were that 23% of white people have had an interaction with a member of the media, compared with 19% of Black folks and 14% of Latin people. Something that I found also interesting was older Americans were more likely to have spoken to a member of the media instead of young folks. 25% of US adults over the age of 65 have spoken to the media, compared to only 17% of those ages 18 to 29. So I want to go a little back to something that I said, and it's that a lot of folks haven't spoken to the media because it may feel intimidating, uncomfortable, or they're scared they're going to be misrepresented. I may be wrong. But the reason I say that is from my own experience. I went to college at Temple University here in North Philadelphia, and I majored, another Temple owl, and I majored in journalism. And during my time at Temple, I had a reporter reach out to me, and he was doing a story about student journalists working at student-run newspapers, and he wanted to talk to me about my experience. I was running a department at the time called Intersection, and we focused around the intersectionality of identities on campus and around North Philly and Philadelphia as a whole. It was something new. Not a lot of student newspapers had, really developed a department specifically covering these communities. So anyway, this gentleman, he reached out to me, and immediately I got super anxious. I was like, no way. I do not want to be interviewed by this person. And the reason was because I felt really nervous. I was like, why me? Why am I qualified to speak about this? And why does what I have to say matter? And then I had to take a step back, and I'm like, I'm a reporter, I'm training to be a reporter, and I'm here nervous to speak my voice and talk to a reporter. So that's, a lot of what I've done in my reporting is when I reach out to folks, especially if they've never talked to the media, be really transparent about it. Because it can be intimidating, and maybe that's not the case for all, but I feel like it's been a case for a lot of people that I've spoken to. So again, I want to go back to the problem of why there's this kind of lack of representation in media. And it's twofold. One, it's that, Black and Brown folks have mistrust in the media, understandably. But the media also has a big problem. One is representation within newsrooms. There's not enough diversity. And two, it's that the media still perpetuates old and harmful stereotypes and stories. When we're seeing Black men in the media, it's often mugshots, crime, things of that nature, even right here in Philadelphia in our local news outlets. But with my work in the plug, what we've known and what we continue to know is there's so much innovation coming out of Black and Brown communities, so much positive work. It's just not getting the exposure that it really needs to get. So that's what we're trying to do. And what we want to see is these bigger, more mainstream outlets doing the same. So let's talk about pushing past these feelings. The media has its own work to do, but how can we as individuals, companies, start encouraging other people to gain this exposure? So I've been with the plug for a few months now, and a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, people in tech that I've talked to, whether it's about their company, an initiative, a program, a common theme I've heard is they tell me that they've been so focused on developing their venture, just getting funding, getting their boots on the ground, that they haven't even thought about getting exposure. And the news media is a really great way to gain exposure. So that's, I really want to harp to you guys that it's understandable, the mistrust and the fear, but it's also a great way to expand your network. Alrighty, so let's say that you've never been contacted by the media, you've never spoken to a member of the media. That doesn't mean that your work isn't valuable, okay? That's something I really want to tell people, is just because you're not contacted by a member of the media doesn't mean that you shouldn't be highlighted. Sometimes the work that I do comes from my own research. So that's me, on LinkedIn, on websites, talking to people and then reaching out and saying, hey, I heard about you from so-and-so and I would love to highlight you. Other times it comes from outreach from individuals. And I actually love that because it's super helpful. One, it makes my job a little bit easier, but two, I'm not in the tech and the innovation community. So I want to hear from the community itself what should be covered. I want to know from my audience what they want to hear. So how do you do that? How do you get highlighted if you haven't gotten an email, a ping on LinkedIn, on Instagram, whatever? How do you start getting attention? And one thing I want to tell folks is you don't need a PR team or a representative or a whole marketing team, because a lot of times somebody is working alone, they're a team of 2, a team of 5, etc. So as CEOs and founders do, they juggle many hats. And one of them is often to be their own PR person and their own rep. And, there's a lot of value in that. So some of my greatest stories since I've worked for The Plug have come from folks that reached out to me that had never gotten any sort of exposure in media. I'll give an example. Once I had this gentleman, he sent me a DM on LinkedIn about a new accelerator program that launched in Philadelphia last year called the Founders Institute. The work they were doing was super cool. They had a lot of really great underrepresented founders that they were supporting, but they didn't get a lot of people in their program. So they had about 10 folks in Philly, but in San Francisco, they'd had hundreds of people. So they really wanted to get the word out about what they're doing here in Philly. So he reached out to me and I thought, great, this is something I would love to highlight in The Plug. Another is an initiative of a founder. She just emailed me. She said, hey, I've read your work in The Plug. I just got this award. And on the surface value, that, because I have my own parameters of what I can cover, that wasn't something that I was able to cover, but I really loved her initiative and I really wanted to find a way to highlight what she did. So she won a Clio Cannabis Award for a music video that she helped produce called Girls Who Smoke Weed. And it was super cool. But again, it's not really something that The Plug would cover because we're focused on tech and data intelligence and things of that nature. So, but I loved her initiative. So I said, okay, let me make a story out of this. So the story that came out of it actually published this morning. I was in a corner this morning trying to get it online. And it was about Black founded artist collectives and the impact that they're making here in Philly. So kind of a big win recently is Rec Philly, which is an artist collective, a co-working space. They got a $2 million investment from Diddy to open another hub in Miami that's going to open in 2023. So a lot of the work that's happening here in Philly is gaining traction. And I wanted to find more of these Black founded, Black owned artist collectives and agencies that people have never heard about, but they're doing super cool stuff in the city. And I was able to highlight her. And her name is Kaylin Mallon, and you guys should check her out. She's the founder of 69 and Sunny. So that's just kind of an example of her taking initiative, emailing me, and finding a way to gain her first type of media exposure. And hopefully people read the article and reach out to her, and she gains more traction with the incredible work that she's doing in the city. So then I want to give you guys some examples of how to reach out to an outlet or an individual. The first thing is, whether you're reaching out, you're in an interview, you have to learn how to brag about yourself. And this is really hard because that's something I really struggle with. Even though, I talk and I write for a living, I have a really hard time, giving myself compliments and talking to people. I typically find that founders are really good at bragging about themselves. They're usually really confident people, but not always. So don't be afraid to say all the great things you've done. Don't hold back because we want to celebrate you. The second piece of advice I would give is think about how the work you're doing is part of a larger trend in the innovation ecosystem and be able to articulate that. So I'll give one example. There was a startup that I covered here in Philly. They're Black founded. They're called Philanthropy, and they're a donation platform that kind of combines philanthropy and tech. And they recently launched an initiative with American Express to create this program where American Express members, each time they make a transaction, they can donate $1, 5, 10 to a donation platform of their choosing. Super cool. Again, maybe not something I would necessarily cover as the plug, but when they reached out to me, they said, we can also talk about the future and the intersection of philanthropy and tech. And I was like, super cool, because this is a larger conversation that we can include. So that's something that's always incredible. If the work that you're doing, you can fit it into another trend or a bigger topic, make sure to bring that up, because you're also an expert in the field that you're in. Don't forget that. And the last thing, this one is kind of menial, but having a catchy email subject line if you're contacting someone by email. So to catch an editor's attention or reporter's attention, I say words like story idea, press release, cool thing happening. All of those buzzwords are super great to include. I love emojis. Yeah. So I say definitely go for those, because you want to catch somebody's attention, because sometimes reporters and media, they just get so many emails in their inbox and maybe they just don't see it. The next thing I want to say is be intentional when you're reaching out. There's definitely a lot to be said about, power in numbers to send it to everyone, but I really recommend that people be intentional when they're reaching out to get traction. So if we're talking here in just Philadelphia, we have a lot of local media outlets. We have the Inquirer, we have Billy Penn, WHYY, technically now the plug. And I encourage folks, when you're looking for an outlet or a news source to highlight the work that you're doing, check out their page and see what type of content they're publishing, and see if you'd be a good fit to gauge if, you're going to gain traction, because your time is valuable, right? And so speaking on that, the plug is kind of a niche outlet, right? So there's certain things that people contact me and I just can't cover it. Recently, I had a PR rep contact me about a social tennis club that a founder is developing, and it's super dope, but it is not something the plug would cover. So it kind of showed me that she never even looked at our website, which is fine, because I don't mind and I love helping folks. So I emailed her back and I said, hey, I recommend that you reach out to this news outlet or this reporter. I think they would really like what you're doing, because I wanted them to get attention and get coverage. And the last thing that I want to say is don't get discouraged. So we talked a little bit about whether you reach out to media or they reach out to you. If you've pitched a story, you've reached out and you haven't heard back, that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't care or they don't want to highlight it, or the work that you're doing isn't important. It just might mean it got lost in an inbox, it went to a spam folder. So I always say, make sure to follow up and advocate for yourself. Send those follow-up emails. They're important. Don't think you're being pesky, because I appreciate them. And I just want to share a little story as well about my own experience with that. So before I joined the plug as their innovation reporter, I did a lot of freelance writing. And has anyone here heard of the film Borat? Yeah. So when Borat 2 came out, I hadn't seen it, but I thought back on an individual that I met. So in 2020, I was living in Tokyo. I got a grant to work at the Japan Times newspaper. And the apartment I was staying at was kind of an international place. And I met a girl from Kazakhstan, where, Borat is supposed to be from. And, 2 years ago, we had had that conversation, and she talked to me about how much she really disliked the film, and people in Kazakhstan, said it was very harmful, because a lot of folks kind of had these stereotypes, even when, tourists came and spoke to them. So when the second film came out in media, I saw a lot of positive feedback, a lot of people saying it was so funny. And I hadn't heard anybody speaking from the perspective of the Kazakh community. So I hadn't talked to this individual in about 2 years. I reached out to her and I was like, hey girl, have you heard about this movie? And she shared with me that there was a lot of outrage in Kazakhstan, that there were all these petitions to get the film blocked and all these things going on. At the time, the media hadn't covered any of this because the movie was still so fresh. And I was like, oh my God, I want to write about this. This is important to cover a different perspective. So anyway, I worked with her. I interviewed a lot of people. She worked with me translating interviews from Russian to English. And we compiled a really great piece. And I pitched it to maybe 50 outlets, 50. So I got back 2 rejections and 48 news outlets ignored me. So that's to say, I was really discouraged. I was like, why does no one want to hear this story? But I still thought it was really important. So the story doesn't necessarily have a happy ending. There wasn't an outlet that was like, yeah, this is super cool. But I decided to self-publish it myself because I thought the story was important and the work that the activists in Kazakhstan were doing really should have been highlighted. So I published it on Medium so I could self-publish. And I thought no one is going to see this. But it ended up getting quite a few views. And even in my own right, I was like, wow, this was important and it did deserve to get exposure. So that long-winded story is to say, even if you don't get a response, the work that you're doing matters, and there are people that want to highlight it and talk about it, especially me. So I kind of want to finish off with the same question I posed in the beginning. Can you please raise your hand if you think the work that you're doing deserves to be highlighted and represented in media? Should be every hand. And it's okay if it's not, but I hope I changed your mind a little bit. So again, I have the pleasure of being here today amongst some really cool speakers. And it's funny that my presentation is on getting your venture impact in media, because when I started at The Plug, some of my first articles were about speakers that are here today, Tanya Morris and Gary Johnson. They're doing super incredible work in this city. And I wrote articles about them. And now here I am talking about it. And I also met so many cool people that I cannot wait to connect with when I leave this conference to write about the work that they are doing. So again, tell me about your work. If you want to come up to me at some point in this conference, please do. If that makes you feel nervous, you can contact me digitally. It's all good. So our website is tpinsights.com if you want to check out our work at The Plug. And you can just find me on any socials. Usually LinkedIn is my full name, Alessia Bani. And that is all I have for you guys. Thank you. Yes, but and I want to leave some time open for any questions, whether it's advice on how to get your own venture impact in media, or just general questions about the tech ecosystem in Philly, or any questions about The Plug and the work that we're doing. No, so The Plug it's national. So I was just hired on a few months ago to report on the Philadelphia area. Yeah, but we do cover general trends. So in addition to our website, which is kind of our editorial content, we have weekly intelligence briefings that are newsletters that folks can sign up for. And it's talking about the Black innovation economy, tech trends, and all of that. We also have a newsletter talking about our HBCU innovation, which is the other leg of our editorial content. Yes.
Okay, so I just walked in, and this is something I'm really interested in. So could you give me maybe the 1 or 2 top highlights of what you said? I'm sorry to be selfish.
No, it's super fine. So I was talking about how to get what the work that you're doing impact in media. And I talked a little bit about why there hasn't been enough coverage on innovation coming out of Black and Brown communities. And the 2 things that we kind of discussed here today was that folks have mistrust the media or feel uncomfortable to talk to the media because they haven't historically been represented, or they've been misrepresented. And the media is still perpetuating old narratives. But there's a lot of positive innovation and amazing work coming out of Black and Brown communities. And this isn't new. I just want to say that The Plug is new and we're covering this work, but this innovation in Black and Brown communities has been happening for generations and generations. It just hasn't gotten the spark and the attention that it needs in the media. And also feel free to come up to me at another point and we can chat a little bit more.
Any other questions?
Sure. Yeah, so that's a really great question. So like I said, The Plug is also a startup. We are a few years old. So a lot of the work that I cover is funding and how people are getting access to funding, and is a challenge that we have ourselves. So we have we've tried to get investments. I don't believe our CEO has gone towards the venture capital route. So we've gone towards grants and different things like that. For example, my position here at The Plug, it was funded through the LensFest Foundation. We got a grant because we created a partnership with Word Radio, which is the only Black-owned radio station in Pennsylvania. So part of our partnership is I go on Word Radio a few times a month, and I talk about the work that I'm doing at The Plug, and we kind of have an ongoing partnership that's helping funding The Plug and Word, and why I was able to join. So kind of initiatives like that is what we go towards.
Any other questions? Thank you. Give it up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessia, for repping for those of us in media. We have not the best rap all the time, which is understandable. Yeah, which is understandable. Everything Alessia said about pitching and having a strong, that's me, y'all. And having a strong subject line is absolutely right, and making sure that you grab people within like that first sentence when you're pitching to reporters. So next up, I'd like to welcome Malcolm Etheridge, CFP financial advisor and host of the Tech Money podcast, The Power of Owning Equity. So without further ado, Malcolm Etheridge.
Okay, no, that's cool. This is a small group. We'll be okay. I assume you guys can hear me okay because we're really close friends at this point. So thank you for that. And essentially, the talk that I want to give, you heard the title, is called The Power of Owning Equity. The focus of it is this idea that I've been working through, this working theory that I have, that there comes a point, if we're lucky, there comes a point in each of our careers, our lives, our existences, where if we do this thing right, we are at a place where we have enough. We have enough house, we have enough car, we have enough activities, we have enough to afford the 10 different streaming services that we all use. We have enough to afford our country club dues or whatever your thing is. Like, there comes a point when in our working lives, hopefully, right? I hope this for all of us in this room and everyone at this event, that there comes a point where we can look and say, like, here's that crossover point where that next dollar I'm able to command in salary, or if you're a business owner, that next dollar you're able to command in revenue, or whatever your thing is, becomes less additive to your life, right? That next dollar has a diminishing rate of return in your overall lifestyle. And at that point, it's really important that we get in the habit of acquiring assets and owning equity in things, right? So the focus of this conference has been about getting our financial lives together, understanding the importance of owning things, investing our dollars, wealth, long-term wealth accumulation, all those kind of things. And this goes along with that, but it's that rather than allow those dollars, those additional dollars that we identify above whatever your enough point is, your enough point is going to be different. You, sir, from his, from hers, from mine. We all have different lifestyles, right? But whatever that number is, applying that next dollar to acquiring assets that actually are going to appreciate long term is the way that the game is won long term. And what I mean by that is, if your enough point is today, you already reached it. You may look at your pay stub and notice that you have more than enough to cover all of those things that I just said. And you actually do have additional dollars going into your bank account and just sitting on a weekly or monthly basis, however you get paid. At that point, you should start asking yourself, what should I be doing with these additional dollars that's going to buy me some time freedom in the future, right? So we're not talking about anything that's going to happen tomorrow morning. We're talking about an entire mindset shift away from being a lender and leaving our dollars in the bank for the bank to turn around and lend to somebody else at much more favorable terms than the interest that they're going to pay us, and instead being an owner. And so taking those dollars and either investing them into the stock market, if that's the thing that makes the most sense to you, is probably the easiest, most accessible. Or if it's investing those dollars into a friend's startup, or if it's investing those dollars into a real estate project, or whatever it is, developing the habit of finding places to put those dollars, those additional dollars that are above your enough point, to acquire equity in more and more things over time that are assets that should appreciate long term, that help you get there. And so, as I said, it's going to take a little bit of a shift in mindset to get there, right? Because a lot of the things that we were taught as younger people, earlier than we ever even had money to manage, earlier than we ever even really had any dollars to be concerned about, the advice that we got from the folks in our family, our parents, our grandparents, probably doesn't apply to you where you are today, right? So that advice to, save every penny you get, or that advice not to take any risk, or don't mess with those people's stock market, all that kind of stuff that like we got from the folks who came before us, that advice was important because it got them to the place they needed to get you here, right? But then there's also the fact that what got you here won't get you there. Where I'm talking about us going as far as owning equity in assets that are going to appreciate long term and actually get you to some sort of financial independence. That's another subjective term, right? Financial independence for me doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as it does for you. Doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as it does for you. But for basically all of us, the thing we can agree to is financial independence in its essence means that the income that you have coming in from your passive investments and activities that you don't have to leave your house to do brings in more dollars than whatever your expenses and the numbers you've committed to going out of your bank account, out of your household on a monthly or an annual basis. That crossover point is happening at that point, right? Whatever that financial independence point is, and however you get there, whether it's, again, from owning property that pays every time you get a rent check, it's paying your bills, or if it's from that business, that friend startup I mentioned that you invested in, they pay a distribution every year. They pay owner dividends. And every time you get that dividend check, that's covering your expenses. Or if you own a stock portfolio that pays you dividends, and those dividends are paying you out every single quarter, and that's enough income to cover those expenses. However you get there, the point is that accumulating enough equity in things that are appreciating and don't require your active effort is how we get to this place that I keep describing, this financial independence point. And so how do we get there, right? The obvious question that people are probably asking is how we actually get to this place where I am describing, this magical place where we have this time freedom. We own our time, to put it another way. The way that we get there is by being what I like to call long-term greedy. It's thinking creatively about things that we can be doing today that are going to pay off 10, 20, 30 years from now, right? It's not necessarily the payout today. It's, accumulating that investment portfolio longer term. It's every single year with those dollars I've determined are above and beyond my enough point, I'm buying one more property, or I'm investing in one more real estate project. And I've looked 10 years later and I've accumulated, because I'm doing it once a year, I've accumulated 10 properties that are now paying me on an annual basis and helping me to get there. Or I'm investing once a year into another startup. Anybody who's ever had any dealings with venture capital knows you don't really need every company you invest in to be the one that gets there. You really just need to be right once or twice, right? And so investing in one company a year for 10 years, still pretty good odds, gets you to the place that you want to get to. And regardless of how you decide to slice it, again, my point in there is just that building that habit and untraining our brains from thinking that we have to store away as much cash as we possibly can for it to be numbers that add up on a page that ultimately amount to some, magical number that we pat on ourselves on the back and feel great about. Instead, repurposing those dollars and shifting our mindset from being a lender to the bank and an owner in these appreciable assets, these income generating assets, is the thing that ultimately gets us to that time freedom that I keep referring to. And so I also think about folks who work for companies where you have a conversation with your manager, your compensation committee, however you're structured, your board, if you're a founder, and the conversation revolves around it's time for you to get paid. And that also means I'm going to need a little bit more this time than the last time we had this conversation, right? But if you're at this point that I'm referring to, and some of you may already be there and haven't quite realized it just yet, that may be a place where it already makes sense for you to say, instead of giving me more cash, right, the salary that you offer me will not be additive to my lifestyle at this point. I'd like more equity instead, right? I would rather own a stake in this firm than have $20,000 additional dollars in my pocket or $25,000 additional dollars in my pocket. Because if we just think about the way the tax code works in America, if you are a person who is in the 35% tax bracket and you live in a state where there's a 5% income tax, 40% of that I just took away to pay taxes, right? So $25,000 you're able to squeeze out of your employer has now suddenly turned into $15,000. But if you were to receive that instead in the form of stock or equity in the company, that $25,000 is worth $25,000 today. It's also got the potential to be a much larger dollar figure down the road, because again, we're not taking it and consuming anything with it. We're reinvesting it into an appreciable asset that's going to turn around and pay us in the future, right? So now I just automatically kept more of that dollar. I unlocked more of its value by reconstructing the way that that dollar is received. And that's really the focus of where I'm going with this is just making sure that we find those opportunities where maybe it's not dollars coming out of my pocket. Maybe I'm a subject matter expert at something and I can create an online course that is going to pay me additional dollars above and beyond what my active employment does, right? So taking the dollars that come from my, I think that was an amen. Taking the dollars that come from that active, excuse me, the dollars that I'm able to create from building that online course, and then investing those dollars into an appreciable asset, and then taking the dollars that get spun off from that and acquiring a real estate property. And maybe it's not even a financial commitment that I'm making, right? I gave you the idea of creating your online course, but maybe I'm a subject matter expert that other people are willing to pay me. But because the company is so small, or it's a startup, or I came in with the creativity to say, don't take cash to pay me my fee as a consultant. Instead, pay me in equity, right? There's this concept out there. There's this opportunity to do what's called a consulting for equity deal. So instead, Mr. Miss Founder, right? I don't need dollars out of the company today for my advice and guidance and expertise as a advisor to the company. It's just going to cost you a little bit of equity, and you do enough of those. Again, same concept I gave you with the venture capitalist. 10 companies over 10 years that you give your advice and guidance to for a 5-10% stake over time. Now you own 5-10% in 10 different companies that one of them's going to go somewhere, right? Maybe two of them. And that's the way that you ultimately get to, again, this place where you turn around and look and go, oh, shoot, I actually now get to do whatever I want to in the morning when I leave this place, instead of it being, that constant treadmill of I'm leveling up my lifestyle now to meet my additional income, because if we don't pay attention, lifestyle creep happens to all of us. And instead putting a lid on it and finding, where that point is to redirect those dollars. So I appreciate you guys' attention. That was the crux of, that was the theory that I mentioned that I'm working through, that I wanted to kind of lay on you guys and share with you today. And so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
I have a mic.
Let me first say that I'm a client of Malcolm's.
So she's biased.
So I'm very biased. We've been associated over the years. So since I pay you to answer my questions, I'm going to take advantage of getting a free question in. And I'll think of one. But let me just say he's worth every penny I pay him. And my only question is, where have you been all my life? I will embarrass you by saying he's just been hired as a CNBC contributor. So you will find him on TV sharing his wisdom.
You can't possibly embarrass me, but thank you.
Only me and your mother would do that, right?
Probably, that's
Yeah.
true.
But kudos for all you do. I mean, check him out. He's worth it.
I appreciate that for sure. And I did not put her up to it if anybody's
It's been a couple of years. I'm still in the games.
fair enough.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you so much, Malcolm. Thank you so much. Give it up for Malcolm
Thank you guys
Etheridge.
for your
y'all.
attention.
Thank you for speaking on financial freedom and the many ways to achieve that and what it looks like. Next up, we have our final speaker, and we will be talking about a much hyped topic, but often scam-filled topic, crypto. Welcome, Brittany Jenkins, founder / CEO, We Are Tech. Intro to DAOs, how to create a self-sustaining ecosystem with crypto communities. Brittany has some documents that I will pass out, QR codes that I'll pass out as well.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, everybody. All right. Well, the paper that she's handing out, there's just some resources that you can scan so that you can learn about what it is I'm talking about. Before I get into this, I'll just share some information about me. My name is Brittany Jenkins. I'm the founder of We Are Tech, which is an ed tech company that focuses on empowering students and communities of color with technology. I started out as a tech entrepreneur in this space that is now called Web3, before it was called Web3. And as a tech entrepreneur, it was really challenging for me to get funding, being a double minority in this space, it can be very challenging to navigate venture capital. So as this space has emerged, though, I've learned a lot from people who are really smart in this space. A couple of people that I've invited here today who have taught me a lot about crypto and a lot about decentralized finance. I've been able to leverage this space just to really understand not only how I can design my business, but also how to do it in an independent way. So today I'll be talking about DAOs. If you scan that paper that I had handed out, you'll see like a definition of DAOs. You'll see a Padlet that has the key takeaways that I'll talk about today. So does anyone know what a DAO is? Do you guys back there know what a DAO is? Have you ever heard of the word DAO? What is your thought of what a DAO is? That's the real key. What do you think it is? Okay, it is a crypto term. Anyone else other than the two guys I know what a DAO is here? Okay, so a DAO is basically, it's a community, it's an open community of people who've come together around a collective thought or a project. And basically they have they gain a position in this community by purchasing membership, whether it be through purchasing that DAO's crypto token or NFT. And that allows them to have leverage so that they can then govern in that space and participate in that space. So DAOs oftentimes they have a goal in mind, and the people who are attracted to that DAO, they want to contribute to it. So they join that DAO so that they can be a part of the development of that project, but also have some say in the direction of where that project goes. So that's like a layman's terms, like definition of a DAO, but there's so much more technical aspects to it. But does that give you guys a clear understanding a little bit? Okay, cool. So I have like on this paper, on this page that I gave you guys, there's just 3 key takeaways. So I'll be very brief. So the first thing I wanted to just share is that crypto is a very it's an easier and accessible asset class. A lot of people, when they think about investing, they're like very turned off by, stocks. They're very confused by it. But crypto is something that's very accessible. Like you can get crypto off of apps like Robinhood, places like Coinbase. There are a lot of different places online where you can get them. But more importantly, when it comes to DAOs, you can also create an ecosystem out of your own commodity that you've created. Like, I don't know if commodity is the right word to use, but you can basically create your own ecosystem. So on this page that I've given you guys, under that first key takeaway, there's some links to some publishing tools where you can learn how to publish your own NFT. You can also publish your own custom token. So these DAOs, they're powered by custom tokens. So if you ever wanted to make your own custom token without code, there are links there for you to do it. There are also ways for you to make those custom tokens with code. But if you want to learn more about that, there are places where you can learn that as well. I've included a link to an organization called DeFi Philly. Some of the guys are here today, and their meetup link is at the bottom of this page as well. The second takeaway, well, I guess I can dive a little bit deeper with this first takeaway. When I learned that I could make my own custom token, I felt very empowered, because as a person who struggled to get financing in venture capital, it was empowering to realize that I could make my own token. Like it's never been hard for me to get people to understand why things are valuable, which is half the battle to get someone to want to buy something. But for me, it's been the battle of getting the funds in order to put out that thing that people find valuable. So to be able to make my own token, I found that it's very valuable that I can convince people to see value in that, so I could use that, the money that's put into that asset, to fund my business, which is the theme for this talk, creating your own self-sustaining ecosystems with crypto. So second takeaway, here in this paper, I talk about how creating utility around your crypto asset can create a valuable market for them. So going back to like the value, like if you create ways in which people can use your custom token or use your NFT, it's going to create value in that asset, and it's going to create a market for people to want to have that asset. Which again, when you come from a disenfranchised background, or if you're even just a young entrepreneur trying to figure things out, being able to create something that people can easily access, and then you can build value around it by giving people an opportunity to use it, that's something that's very revolutionary. Like that, I haven't been on this earth long, but I haven't seen anything like that. Like crypto brings a space where you can create value. You can kind of manufacture the intrinsic value of something, kind of like art. You make a piece of art and it's very subjective. Now you can do that with digital technology and allow people to access it in a way where they haven't been before. And people can make it's like printing. I probably shouldn't say this, but it is like minting your own money. Like you're minting your own assets, So I think, being a part of a community of people that's so used to making something out of nothing, because we now have this asset or this access, it's very powerful. So my last takeaway is how you would integrate mechanisms into automating this. So the key to a DAO, and the A in the word DAO, is autonomous, and loosely linked to that is automation. And what I really want to do with the DAOs that I want to create is to fully automate everything that people are doing around that asset, so that that asset generates value on its own. The whole goal of creating a DAO or creating an organization that is powered by a token is for there to be no employees. You want it to be set up in a way where people they understand how they're contributing value to this asset, and that alone is automated. So as an entrepreneur in this Web3 space, I'm constantly thinking about the 2-hour workday. Like, how do I organize people in a way and automate what they do in a way where they can really, I'm also more of like a social entrepreneur in the sense that I want people to really see value in themselves and maximize that. So I'm constantly thinking about the 2-hour workday. Like, if you could do one thing for 2 hours a day, what would it be? And how can you maximize that to the point where that can sustain your living? So with DAOs, them being autonomous and being able to be automated, I see there's a way where you can set things up. We have like Zapier, we have these platforms like make.com. Like if you have a digital business, you can automate it in a way where it operates itself and people are all putting in a minimum amount of their capacity in order to make it operate. And that contribution, because it's powered by your DAO is powered by a token, that contribution can create value that everyone can benefit from. So on this doc, I've provided just some key platforms, Web3 platforms. Like there's a platform called D-Work on here where you could set up task boards and you could pay people in your own custom token so that you can create that automation into your business. And there's a lot in here. If you are online and you're not, if you aren't here in person, this page that I'm referring to, you can find it at bit.ly/Chroma-DAO. So bit.ly, bit.ly slash Chroma, CHROMA-DAOs. That's DOA, just DAO by itself. Also, if you would like to learn more about this space, if you're in Philly, you should definitely come by to the DeFi Philly events. You need to go to the DeFi Philly events. You should go to the DeFi Philly events because I've learned so much from them. They're great guys. And on this doc that I provided, you can learn more about We Are Tech. We are on Instagram at weare.tech and on Twitter at wearetech by POC. So that's just a little bit about DAOs. Feel free to ask me more questions. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at BeTheInfluence. Thank you. Oh, there's questions from the stream. Oh, hey guys, hey, how you doing? I didn't mean to neglect the stream. How you guys doing out there? I can definitely dive in more for the people who are online because I know the people online may have more questions.
Will the links you're speaking of be shared with the online viewers, like the links that are made available on Literature?
Yeah, so if they go to bit.ly/Chroma, so that paper, if you hand him that paper, he could type it in. bit.ly/Chroma-DAO. That paper that's in her hand, that's how you get to it. Most definitely. Any other like specific questions from online?
Yeah, Brittany, we have
Cool.
a question from at the Wealth Activator. What are
Cool.
some of the steps used to put your own token out into the market?
Yes. Okay. And there's someone here who does not want to get on stage and talk, but I want him to come talk about it. So I can tell you from like a more layman's terms perspective, but I would if he's able to come explain it more. Okay. So in that link, oh good, this warms my heart. I'm so glad you guys asked the question. In that link, there is a platform called Mirror. There's a couple platforms. So there's this platform called mirror.xyz. It's a platform that's very like all inclusive. It's built on the Ethereum blockchain. You can make a custom token on Mirror. You can mint NFTs on Mirror. You can make your own like writing. Like if you wanted to like make like a case study, that's what I plan on using it for. You could mint it as an NFT. You can also do crypto crowdfunding on Mirror. But the thing I like about Mirror is that you can make a certain supply of tokens. And then if you want more, you can make more of that same token. Now, there's this other platform called Coinvice, and Coinvice is on the webpage that I provided as well. Coinvice allows you to make a custom token. The only thing is when you make that token, you make the supply that you're going to work with right then and there. So those are two no-code solutions for making your own custom token. And I've used both of them to make my own tokens. Like I used Mirror to make a token for my personal brand. So I made what is it? I think my coin is like $be the I, like be the influence. And then I used it for my business too. We do digital literacy. So I made a Digilit coin on I think I made my Digilit coin on Coinvice. But yeah, those are two no-code solutions. And then you could actually code a token as well. You want to come break it down a little bit, Mike? Put Mike on the spot. So, guys, this is Mike Yin. He's super, super, super smart. He's one of the founders of DeFi Philly. So, he's just going to say a little bit about making your own custom token with code.
Yeah, thanks. When I hear like, oh, how do I make my own token? Yeah, there's a lot of tools that you can just like mint a token. But when it comes to like, I want to make a token that does a certain thing, then you do have to write it yourself or find someone who can write it for you. Just like there are web developers, there are token developers. I teach I've taught at UPenn and I create some of these people. So they're out there. You can find them. Some of the custom functionality that's kind of popular is inflation. And one of the things I would say is anyone looking in the token space, the model that I've seen that works, and it might be a little difficult to understand when you first hear it, is creating a token that people are willing to buy for whatever reason. Maybe it's to join a membership thing. That's probably the most common. And what I would steer you towards is use like tokens to, gate membership. But if you bake a inflation into that, and the inflation, which says like, the supply of the tokens are going to increase over time. That's what inflation is. You can basically pay the inflation right back to yourself. And so long as there is a market where you can then continue to sell the token, what you can do is you can kind of have this inflationary funding where you just continue to inflate the supply of the token. Those tokens come to you. You can choose how you wish to sell them. And that continues to fund your business. And that's a model that actually has worked out for a couple of businesses where they'll do like a seed round from friends and family, and then they'll kick a token into the mix, and then the token has inflation, and the inflation is paid back to a treasury that the owners of it own, and then they can decide to sell more of it. And yeah, like I said, I think the main thing about doing your own token is, if you want to just make a token to raise money and that's it, then I don't necessarily think a token is the best way to do that. But if you're trying to like pre-sell your product or, pre-sell to raise money to build something, I think that's a great way to use a token. And the most common would be like, if you're trying to do like a membership community, well, you can sell memberships ahead of time to people using tokens. And that's a fine model.
So that brings me back to Mirror. Like Mirror is if you are a person who's like low to no code, you're like just trying to figure this out. Mirror is a good platform where you do what he just said. Like you can make a crypto crowdfunding campaign on there. You can start writing and telling your story and engage people and mint those actual items of writing as NFTs. But one thing I want to add to what you were saying. So if you wanted to code your own token, a good platform to use is this platform called Remix. What is it? Remix-ethereum.org. Yeah, that is a really good platform. And there's a plugin called Learn ETH, I believe, that I really want to dive into. So like when you're coding, actually, I'm glad to be able to share this. So in addition to being an entrepreneur, like I started off as a STEM educator, in like maybe like 4 years ago. Like before then I used to code, like I studied digital entrepreneurship in college. So I was learning code. But when I became a STEM educator, that's when I dove really deep into JavaScript. And JavaScript and Java are like the basis of Solidity, which is the coding language that you need to know in order to code these tokens. In order to code anything blockchain Web3, you need to understand Solidity. So if you are looking to get into code and want to understand this space, if you're new to it, you can dive into Solidity, but like I always try to tell people, like if you really want to like slay at the apps, learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript just to understand how to talk to a computer. Like this, you want to know the command line and like the deeper stuff, but if you want to understand how programming languages talk to each other and then interact with the computer, it's good to know just have a basis of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML and CSS is front end. JavaScript gets you to understand that back end a little bit better, but JavaScript is going to give you that foundation to really naturally just be able to look at Solidity. Like I haven't even learned a bunch of Solidity, but when I look at it, I'm not intimidated by it because I've been coding in JavaScript for the past 8 years now, 4 years spent teaching kids. So yeah, remix-ethereum.org and download the, or install the Learn ETH plugin so that you can get a better hold on what's going on, Thank you so much, Mike. So yeah, are there any more questions online from what we were sharing? No?
Any questions in the room?
All
Thank
right.
you so much,
Thank you.
Brittany, and thank you so
you.
much, Mike, as well. Oh, there's gonna be a
Okay.
photo. Mike is like, I wasn't ready for this.
Thanks for having us, guys. Okay. Oh, on my Oprah tip. Okay. It's okay. Just. Oh yes, come to for real. Come to DeFi Philly. I cannot emphasize that enough. Like the link to their meetup is inside the document that I shared. Go to the DeFi Philly events. Like if you are in Philly, even if you're not in Philly, you're thinking about coming to Philly. Like these are really, really good guys. Like I cannot express how much I appreciate you guys. Like I've been an entrepreneur since I was 19. I'm 30 and I have not been treated the way I've been treated. I'm not gonna cry. But I'm just saying, like, I haven't been treated the way I've been treated by you guys in my entire time. So thank you. Thank
We
you.
love that. Yes, give it up for Brittany and Mike, y'all. Give it up. Look at this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Look at that. Love. Oh, no. Thank you so much, Brittany, for all the knowledge and also for the link because I sent it to like 5 friends who talk about crypto constantly. So we have made it to the end of the road, like boys to men. Thank you so much for being here. Shout out to all our speakers for dropping all these gems today. Shout out to everyone on the live streams tuning in. Again, Team BBF extends the deepest of gratitude to the Thrive campaign with the NASDAQ Foundation, Black Squirrel Collective, along with Macquarie Group Foundation, our host, the Science Center, and Comcast for the support of Black and Brown founders and their partners. Again, my name is Sophia Ballin. I've been your host for today. If you want to find and support me, you can find me on all socials at SOF as in fire, IYABALLIN. My last name is Ballin. That's my real last name. I'm hoping it's self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, any videos, any quotes the QR code for the cocktail this evening, to go to the cocktail hour this evening, just scan this QR code. Again, if you heard anything, any gems, any bars, photos, videos, please hashtag Chroma 2022, and please follow Black and Brown founders at BB Founders. And I hope that with the intellectual and spiritual wealth shared today that you feel armed to share that and build upon it, not just for yourself, but for the generations after. So have a great one, y'all. It's been real.